Hey, everybody, what's going on? I'm here with our March AMAs. A little late again. Apologies. It's just been kind of crazy. All kinds of stuff. So I'm going to dive right in. So a few topics actually for tonight that I want to get into. The first topic is people did follow up and ask me a lot of questions about the newsletter I wrote on REDS, so REDS, the low energy availability, and as well as energy deficiency. So the comments were pretty wide ranging, which was great. I loved the questions coming from all angles on this. The first being, what it looks like for an athlete. And then, when people are like, well, I'm an athlete, so how do I know? Then I got a lot of comments from folks who were saying that, but I'm not an athlete, so this can't possibly apply to me. Well, it can, okay? It may not be REDS specifically, but low energy availability is a thing. Okay. And it's something that is actually more common among general population than you would think. And it has to do with a number of different factors, but one of the most prevailing factors that comes up that ends up you see happening in athletes, and then it does happen with more of us regular folk, and that is just having an unhealthy relationship with food. And how does that manifest? So, we hear the stories. Well, I should say the stories become more prevalent, right? Now that we've got some research out there. But for the longest time, and this is what kind of cracks me up, for the longest time, REDS and problems with not getting enough energy in was a huge problem in women's sport. This is not anything new. I actually kind of had to chuckle a little bit when these studies were coming out, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure most women's sports are sitting back going, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we know what this is. We've been suffering from it and experiencing it for a long time. It was showing up more prevalently in women's endurance sports. So you were seeing a lot of high profile, long course runners, triathletes, cyclists, where the issues of, not having enough calories in, and then the body fat percentage dropping to, a precipitously low level, to where, it was throwing off their hormones. So it's not having regular periods, to, a number of different factors, these health issues that were popping up and surfacing. It wasn't, of course, and I know some of the people who are watching this are going to think, of course, it wasn't until this started to show a little bit more in men that this all of a sudden became a thing. All right. Women's sports has been suffering from issues like this for a very, very long period of time. It didn't just happen. Okay. The studies started to come up, and they included males. And I guess unsurprisingly, right now it's a whole big thing. But I know for a fact, and I actually had a female coach reach out to me who was saying this very thing, that REDS has been around for a very long time. Low energy availability has been around for a very long time in women's sports, and it was just never getting the attention it needed. I don't even know that it still necessarily is. Even with all the evidence and with the studies that have come out and the damage that it can do, not just in sport, but in general population, and the effect that it has on people. And again, a lot of it stemming from just not having very good relationships with food. And then how does that manifest? Whether it's body dysmorphia, whether it's manifesting in body dysmorphia, whether it's manifesting in eating disorders. There are a number of different things that come from that, right? And so when we look at what is the cause of, not having enough energy, we look at, it's not in every case, but in several cases, what you're seeing are people who just unfortunately have developed these poor relationships with food, have developed a poor sense of self, are not seeing themselves as the rest of us are. And then it just, it can go in a number of different directions from there. So yes, it is a thing. And yes, it can affect you regardless if you are a high level athlete or not. This is something that affects everybody, and it very much is a thing. So I think that it's important to recognize that. It's why, when you talk about not having a lot of energy throughout the day, before you start taking a bunch of stuff, it's really important to take stock of what is actually going on. Okay. Your sleep, your hydration, your nutrition. I think it's important to look at those things before you decide to start adding in a bunch of supplementation, because if you're being honest about how much you're actually consuming and you see that maybe you're not consuming what you need, there is a cost to that. Okay? There is a cost to that. And you don't need to be an elite athlete to have this happen to you. I don't want it to happen to anybody, but things like low energy availability does not discriminate. Things like body dysmorphia does not discriminate. Poor relationships with food does not discriminate. So I think it's important you have a pretty honest conversation with yourself. And if you don't think you can, I think it's important you talk to somebody who you trust, who is non-judgmental, but is also looking out for your best interest when it comes to this type of a topic. Okay? So yes, it is a thing for all, not for just a certain group, certain population. The other topic that came up was, how much do I rely on AI when it comes to programming? I don't. I know some people do. Cool. I'm not judging one way or another. For myself personally, I don't like to use AI models to program. It's just a disconnect, I think, with the athlete themselves and with understanding where the athlete is. There are some predictive, things that you can use with AI that do make it a little bit more helpful, I think, to perhaps program out. I've looked at some of that stuff. I mean, some of it's actually pretty cool. I will admit some of it's pretty cool, but I'm not, for myself personally, on the coaching side, I'm not a huge fan of it. I still love the connection that I have with the athletes that I coach, and being able to put things together that I've crafted over time and have not put into ChatGPT. But look, it's becoming more and more prevalent in the world of programming. It's becoming more and more prevalent, when it comes to tracking. There's a number of pro cycling teams right now that are using AI apps when it comes to how they're programming their nutrition, not just their training models, but how they're programming their nutrition and what that looks like. And they're using it with great effect. It's been extremely successful for a lot of these teams. And I think that's probably going to be the future. I think you're going to see more of that going on. But understand though, with those things, there is a tremendous amount of oversight from the teams themselves. Okay. So you've got a number of folks who are very much on top of ensuring that whatever is being pumped out from the AI, that it is fitting correctly with whatever the athlete or athletes need to be doing. So it's not a case of, pro cyclist gets a nutrition plan, pumped out to them versus, from this AI model, and then it just goes unchecked and the athlete is up, left to themselves to just hope that everything that's getting churned out is exactly what they need. It's not the case. Okay. There's a lot of oversight. So I think it's important to keep some of that stuff in mind. There's another reason why I'm a little skeptical with AI. It's also, AI is only as good as the information that you're gonna put into it. So when I had a conversation, actually it was interesting to have a conversation with a friend this week who was trying to use AI to help determine a program for themselves to improve their VO2 max. They're relying on some metrics from their watches, from their wearables, that wasn't attached to heart rate. Okay, so they were relying on their wearable to determine their VO2 max and the predictability. This is woefully inaccurate. Okay, I know what Garmin wants to tell you. I know what Apple is going to tell you. I think there's probably, if not all, but most of the bigger name wearables, Coros, Suunto, are pumping out your VO2, your predicted VO2, or your current VO2 based on what your training is, right? Or whatever you're doing. So it's just spitting out a number. It's woefully inaccurate. Okay. I've said this in a post a long time ago for myself. I know what this says. and I know what happens when I go in the lab, and they're not even close. Okay, not even close. So I don't rely on my watch to tell me what my VO2 is. You need to have either a breath to breath device, which the PNOEs, the breath masters, or you need to go into a lab and have a mixer where you're hooked up to the tube, and then you're going through a ramp test, right? To me, that, and I'm not the only one that says this. There are hundreds and thousands of coaches that will tell you, and medical professionals will tell you, the best way to determine your VO2 is that. Period. Relying on a wearable until they do something crazy, to change it, simply relying on what's coming off the wrist and the information that you've input, woefully inaccurate. Okay. So, but if you're using that number and you're putting it into AI, right? Now AI is it's going to spit out heart rate zones. It's going to spit out workouts that are going to be related to that number, right? So you're putting bad information in and you're getting bad information out, right? So it's kind of a bad loop there, right? So when it comes to, and when I had an opportunity to look at what AI sent this individual, I was none of it made any sense. It was, to me, it seemed like it was going to do a lot more harm than good. So it didn't, for me, it didn't reinforce my belief for myself not using AI, and it wasn't like dissuading me, but it's just evidence that AI is only capable of so much, and if it's still relying on you to put some information in, and the information you're putting in isn't correct, it's what you're going to get spit out is probably not going to be what you expect. So if you're using AI to create a workout plan, if you're using AI to create a nutrition plan, I'm not suggesting that it's the worst thing in the world. See what it looks like. If something seems off, or if it seems like it's questionable, or if it seems like it's very rigid and it has no room for flexibility, like you have no way to have it adapt to you, if it's not going to learn you, then maybe think about doing something else or having somebody look at it. Just another set of eyes could be super, super beneficial. Aside from that, I did mention, I think it was in the last newsletter, I mentioned sitting in on a seminar that was discussing a different or alternative ways to test aerobic capacity. And while that was a very narrow scope of a seminar, it was great. I felt very, very fortunate to be a part of it. The thing that I kept coming back to was the whole point of tests like that they were actually designed for general population, not for athlete specific. And then the reason is why. It's about discovering what your limiters are and how you can remove them. So, I know I've said this several times, like we should move more, you should drink a little bit more water, and all those things I believe in all those things, but people get hung up or begin to struggle with staying consistent. And I'm just going to say the working out side of things just for now. When they have something that they can't get past, or they've got something going on that they can't get past, and it's preventing them from actually enjoying what they're doing and seeing the progress they want to see. And that could be a limiter, right? The example that I come to, which is probably the simplest, and I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about when I say this, it's why do people not enjoy running? It could be the stress and the strain, but more often than not, what I hear is, I don't know how to breathe when I run. Breathing is a limiter, okay? So whether people begin to panic breathe, or they can't develop a cadence that makes sense, or they feel like they're breathing too much through their mouth, or they're taking too deep a breath. Breathing, or how someone breathes when they run, tends to be a really big limiter for them when it comes to running. And so what people will do is they will drop off because they can't find a way to comfortably breathe when running. And regardless of how fast or slow they go, they struggle to find a pace, and they just say, screw it, I don't want to do this anymore. right? It's too difficult. This is just not working out the way I want it to work out. I'm going to try something else. We'll spin that out further. If you have something going on, let's say whatever, like you got a shoulder thing going on, right? But you like working out, you like to lift, and you like being able to do maybe some interval training, some high intensity interval training too, right? But this shoulder or this hip or whatever it might be prevents you from actually doing more of it or enjoying it. Eventually you're going to think about stopping. I mean, yeah, sure, we find workarounds for a while until the workaround stops working too. So, while we talk about, you want to have some variety and the goal is to constantly, is to keep moving and to move. Yeah, you should. But these are the reasons why people get hung up and stop. And these are real things. So taking a top-down approach, okay? If you want to talk about, okay, let's look at elite athletes, okay? Something that we see them do before they begin to add more is remove the limitations they have. Now, not all of them, okay? But the ones that are probably the most successful start by eliminating the things that are preventing them from being amazing at what they do before they add anything else on. So they're unbelievably phenomenal, unbelievable athletes, right? But there's something, whatever it is. Now they remove it. Now they're even better, okay? So before they add anything, by facing and handling whatever that limitation, that hang up is, it's going to change what they decide to add. Same thing applies to everybody else, okay? When somebody decides to add, as I mentioned, if somebody decides to add running to their workout routine and they can't find a breathing cadence, adding a new pair of shoes isn't going to solve the breathing problem. Adding in a bunch of run-specific drills, while helpful, isn't going to solve the breathing problem. We're so quick to add, right, to try to fix or work around something. What we're not doing is actually facing whatever that limitation is. If it's a pain issue, we're not, how many people, show of hands, not going to an ortho soon enough, or a GP or your GP to talk about it and see if there's, a reason to go see an ortho, or, where should I go to continue to get better and improve this? Like, we always come to the party too late with that stuff. I did. I'm in the middle of it now, right? I'm coming to the end of week 5 of post PRP injections, right? And I, just today got the green light to start a return to run protocol for my orthopedic surgeon. So, it's been a long road. It's been over 6 years of dealing with hamstring feeling good and not feeling good, right? I should have seen my ortho years ago with this and gotten PRP years ago and addressed this, right? So, but, instead, trying to find ways to work around the issue and, moving a bike seat and changing a run position, all of it to basically not improve anything and probably cause more imbalances and weaknesses in areas like hips and ankles and feet, which got ignored for way too long, that now, I've been addressing for a little while now. But it's, I say all of this to point out, like, we're waiting too long to get rid of the limitation that's allowing us to enjoy things more and then think about doing more. Okay. So before, if anybody who's practiced Olympic lifts, this is going to make this, hopefully this makes sense. Okay. To be proficient, I'm not even saying great, to be proficient at an Olympic lift, there's a lot of skill that's required, which means there's a lot of time required to do that. So if you're saying, well, I would like to have some Olympic lifts in my workout program, I'd like to add those things. But if you're not getting the mechanics of it down, then you're risking injury, right? And you know you're risking so you risk injury, which is the biggest, and that could be that could be pretty bad. Low back. I think of low back. I think of shoulders right away. I think of hips when it comes to not knowing how to properly move in an Olympic lift, and then I think about the lack of progress and what that does to the mental state, right? So, before you add, I've seen people do this when I was coaching CrossFit. It was like, well, I'm going to add lifters. And it's like, okay, that's not a terrible idea, but have you thought about just working with a barbell or with a piece of PVC to get better at the Olympic lift first before you get a pair of lifters, before you get a pair of knee sleeves, before you do all this other stuff? Maybe we get better at the mechanics of it, and then we talk about those things, right? That's important to recognize. We all have a limiter somewhere. All of us do, okay? And the quicker we are willing to address those things, the quicker we're going to discover that we can improve, we can enjoy what we're doing more, and we're less likely to quit. We're less likely to quit the thing that we have invested some time in and say that we want to do. We're more likely to enjoy that, and we'll stick with it. We'll stick with those things. But you got to be willing and be honest with yourself to actually do that. All right. There's another part, and this is what gets a little hard for people to hear. There's another part here that I've discovered, and that this came up in the seminar too. You may not want to, which is fine, right? Like we talked about running and breathing a lot in the seminar, and I thought to myself, yeah, that's a huge thing. For some folks who say, well, I'd like to run, but I don't know how to get the breathing down, and then they're given the opportunity to get the breathing down, and they say, fuck it, because it doesn't mean as much to them as they said it did, which is fine. But you got to be honest about that. You got to be honest with yourself about that. Okay. It makes no sense to bullshit everybody around you and say how much it means and how much you want to do it when you aren't willing to do the small things and remove those limitations to actually get better. When it was something that I saw a lot coaching classes. It was like, well, I really want to get better at Olympic lifts. Cool. You got some time to put in. You got an additional 20 to 30 minutes a week. Maybe you can work on this. Or can you come to the Sunday Olympic lifting class? Well, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, then you're not going to get better at it. So maybe now you stop complaining, right? Pull-ups were always a thing. I want to get better at pull-ups. Okay, are you going to work on it? Well, no. Okay. My pull-ups don't get worse because you don't work on yours, right? My Olympic lifts don't get worse because you don't work on yours. Just don't bullshit about it, and then don't complain. So if you're stuck, or if you've got something physically going on that's preventing you from feeling good when you're working out and you don't want to address it, that's not the world's problem. That's a you problem. Now, that's tough for people to hear. That's tough. And I get that. All right. I didn't want to hear it. But it's the truth. And so you have to decide what's actually the most important. What you really want to do and enjoy when it comes to the physical fitness side of things. And I say this on the nutritional side of things too, right? If you are talking about wanting to eat more whole foods, but then we have the conversation about, you backing off of eating, fast food 8 times a week, and you're like, no, I'm not giving that up. Well, then you really don't want to, get healthier, right? It's important that we understand that and just be honest about what it is we're really, really talking about, what we want and what we don't. And there's no harm done if you decide that You're just not willing to do those things. But then you can't complain about it. And that's the part nobody wants to hear. Nobody wants to hear that part. Nobody wants to hear that you can't complain about it then. But that's the truth. Okay? So hopefully this was helpful. If you feel like you've got something that is preventing you from enjoying what you want to do more, then reach out. I'm happy to talk about it. If you do want to talk more about RED-S, or low energy availability or energy deficiency, please, it's a serious subject. It is a serious subject. And again, this is not an athlete specific subject. I think we're so quick to tune out because we think that this only happens to athletes. It does not. I'm telling you, it does not. Okay. This is not athlete specific. And it's important that you be honest with yourself about that. If you have questions about that, please reach out. If you recognize it in yourself and you realize that it's stemming from something that's deep, I'm not the person that can help solve that, but I'm more than happy to give you the names of people that I think can or at least point you in the right direction. And I salute and applaud anybody who is willing to take that step. I know it's tough, but it's so important for your overall health. Forget your physical, forget just the physical gains. Okay. It's not just about that. All right. It's about your overall health and wellness. It's about your mental health and your emotional health too. And that's a big deal. Okay. So please don't hesitate to reach out about that. If you have questions about AI models and what that looks like in terms of training or programming, I don't know a ton. I can speak to a little bit of it. I can probably point you in the direction of people who know more. But thanks as always for tuning in. Again, questions, comments, hit me up. See ya.